Hello everyone, my name is Siti Amira Lutfia. I am studying at BSA University, majoring in English department. And here is my new project and pronunciation drill. It's all about read all the parts correctly. So we have around like 3 parts or something. Let's start from the very first part. Read these words. See, she, su, shoe, sip, ship, as, ash, rush, push, shit, show, washing, Swedish, show, shake, machine, English, shop, show, special, shrunk, shut, finished, shouldn't, sure, wish, demonstration, television, treasure, garage, casual clothes, Peugeot, Asia, measuring tape, an unusual collision, ships, chips, ship, chip, cherry, chop, cash, catch, wash, watch, children, butcher shop, Mrs. Church, check, chum, chops, much, Cheshire, shoulder, which, cheaper, a delicious chicken, choose, children's lunch, orange juice, rich child, which job, village jail, watch chain, college chess, large gentleman, which chair, large cherries, huge jam jar, how much cheese, teach German. And then next to the second part, read this text. More US adults who do not already have children are saying they are unlikely to ever have them. The new Pew Research Center survey finds findings that could draw renewed attention to the risk of declining birth rates for industrialized nations. Experts are concerned that the US birth rate, which has declined for a sixth straight year, may not fuel enough population growth on its own to keep the future economy afloat and fund social programs. Women between the ages of 18 to 49 and men between 18 to 59 who say they are not parents were asked the question. Thinking about the future, how likely is it that you will have children someday? In October, 26% of them said it is very likely, a 6-point drop for 2018 when 32% answered very likely. Meanwhile, the share of Americans who answered not too likely in 2021 grew up to 20% compared to 16% in 2018. When asked for a reason, 56% of childless adults who said it is not at all or not too likely they will ever have children say it's because they just don't want them. That's a change from in 2018 when 63% of childless adults in this category said it was because they had no desire for children. This time around 43% cited other reasons including medical issues, economic or financial reasons, and lack of partner, help out of the quicksand, how the childcare crisis is keeping moms out of work. When the pandemic led to lack of childcare, single mothers like Nice Theory were left in the lurch, unable to work, coupled with the recent release of federal demographic data. This poll points to long-term evolution in parenthood trends in the United States, the spiraling post of childcare, healthcare, and education, along with global instability, including the coronavirus pandemic and climate change, could all be contributing to a broader change in attitude to marriage and priorities in life. U.S. birth rate falls to its lowest level in decades in wake of pandemic. In April, the Census Bureau reported that in the last decade, the U.S. population grew at the second slowest rate for any 10-year period since the nation's founding. Pew surveyed 3,866 parents and non-parents online in late October as part of a broader study of nearly 10,000 U.S. adults known as the American Trans Panel Survey. Those who say they have no children were asked to rate their desire to have them in the future, while adults who say they already have children were asked to rate their likelihood of having more. The same question were asked in a similar poll Pew conducted in late July to early August 2018. Enabling comparison of trends over time, there was no difference based on gender in the responses among parents and non-parents. According to Pew, men and women are equally likely to say they will probably not have kids or more kids in the future. There was a difference based on age, however, with adults in their 40s far more likely than younger adults to say they are unlikely to have any or any more children in the future. The Biden administration has attempted to tackle some of the roadblocks to higher fertility through its roughly 2 trillion Build Back Better bill, which recently passed the House and is now moving to the Senate. The bill includes funding for universal pre-K as well as the first national paid family and medical leave program. And then let's move to the third part. Read this story. She was walking lazily, for the first April sun was directly overhead. Her umbrella blocked its rays, but nothing blocked the hat. The sort of raw, wild hat that crushes you with its energy. A few buffalo were tethered under coconuts, browsing the parsed verges. Occasionally a car went past, leaving its threads in the melting pitch like the wake of a ship at sea. Otherwise it was quiet, and she saw no one. In her long white Sunday dress, you might have taken Jeannie Narin for 14 or 15. In fact, she was 12, a happy, uncomplicated child with nature as open as the red hibiscus that decorated her black, waistline hair. Generations earlier, her family had come to Trinidad from India as overseers on a sugar plantation. Her father had had some success through buying and clearing land around Rio Cristalino and planting with coffee. On a dusty verge, 20 yards ahead of Jeannie, a car pulled up. She had noticed it cruise by once before, but she did not recognize it and could not make out the driver through its dark windows, themselves as black as its gleaming paintwork. As she walked past it, the driver's glass started to open. "Hello, Jeannie," she heard behind her. She paused and turned. A slight color rose beneath her dusky skin. Rafi Kirjani was tall and lean and always well dressed. His black eyes and large white teeth flashed in the sunlight as he spoke. Everyone in Rio Cristalino knew Rafi. Jeannie often heard her unmarried sister talk ruefully of him, of how, if only their father were alive and they still had land, one of them might marry him, and then they would squabble over who it might be and laugh at Jeannie because she was too simple for any man to want. "How do you know my name, Rafi?" she asked with a thrill. "How do you know mine? Everyone knows your name. You're Mr. Kirjani's son." "Right, and where are you going, Jeannie?" She hesitated and looked down at the ground again. "To chapel," she said with a faint smile. "But Jeannie, good Hindus go to temple." His rich, cultured voice was gently mocking as he added with a laugh. "Or maybe the temple pandits aren't your taste in color." She blushed more deeply at the reference of Father Olivier. She didn't know how to reply. It was true that she liked the young French priest with his funny accents and blue eyes, but she had been going to the Catholic chapel for months before he arrived. She loved its cheerful hymns and its simple creed of one God, so different from those miserable Hindu gods who squabble with each other like her sister at home. But added to that, the vulgarity of Rafi's remark bewildered her because his family were known for their breeding. People always said that Rafi would be a man of honor like his father. Rafi looked suddenly grave. His dark skin seemed even darker. It may be that he regretted his words. Possibly he saw the confusion in Jeannie's white-brown eyes. In any case, he didn't wait for an answer. "Can I offer you a little chapel in my 21st birthday present?" he asked. Putting his sunglasses back on, she noticed how thick their frames were. Real gold, she thought, like the big fat watch on his wrist. "In a Mercedes from Papa. Do you like it?" he added nonchalantly. From the shade of her umbrella, Jeannie peered up at a small lone cloud that hung motionless above them. The sun was beating down mercilessly, and there was an urge in the air, an overpowering sense of growth. With a handkerchief, she wiped the sweat from forehead. Rafi gave a tug at his collar. "It's air-conditioned, Jeannie, and you won't be late for chapel," he continued, reading her mind. But chapel must have been the last thing on Rafi's mind when Jeannie, after a moment's hesitation, accepted his offer, for he drove her instead to a quiet sugar field outside town, and there, with the Mercedes concealed among the sugar canes, he introduced himself into her. Jeannie was in a daze. Young as she was, she barely understood what was happening to her. The beat of calypso filled her ears, and the sugar cans towered over her as the cold draught from the air conditioner played against her knees. Afterwards, clutching the rich flower that had been torn from her hair, she lay among the tall, sweet-smelling cans and sobbed until the brief tropical twilight turned to starry night. But she told no one, not even Father Olivier. 2 weeks later, the little market town of Rio Cristalino was alive with gossip. Rafi Kirjani had been promised, and the hand of Sunita Murpalani. Like the Kirichunists, the Murpalanis were an established Indian family, one of the wealthiest in the Caribbean. But while the Kirichunists were diplomats, the Murpalanis were a commercial family. They had made a fortune in retailing long before the collapse in oil prices had emptied their customers' pockets, and now Murpalani stores were scattered throughout Trinidad and some of the other islands. Apparently, they had diversified into banking and insurance, and as a result, their influence was felt at the highest level. It was a benevolent influence, of course, never abused, for people always say that the Morpalanis were a respectable family and well above reproach. They had houses in Port of Spain, Tobago, and Barbados, as well as in England and India, but their main residence was a magnificent, sprawling, colonial-style mansion just to the north of Rio Cristalino. The arranged marriage would be the social event of the following year. When Ginny heard of Raven's engagement, the loathing she had conceived for him grew into a sort of numb hatred. She was soon haunted by a longing to repay that heartless, arrogant brute. She would give anything to humiliate him, to see that leering, conceited grin wiped from his face. But outwardly she was unmoved. On weekdays she went to school, and on Sundays she went still to Father Olivier's afternoon service. "Girl, you sure does have a lot to confess to that Whitey," her mother would say to her each time she came home late from chapel. "He's not a Whitey, he is a man of God." "That is as may be, child, but don't forget he does be a man first." The months passed, and she didn't see Ravi again. And then it rained. All through August, the rain hardly stopped. It rattled persistently on the galvanized roofs until you thought you would go mad with the noise. And if it stopped, the air was as sticky as treacle that you prayed for it to rain again. Then one day in October, towards the end of the wet season, when Ginny's family were celebrating her only brother's 18th birthday, something happened that she had been dreading for weeks. She was lying in the hammock and on the balcony playing with her 6-year-old nephew, Penny. Suddenly, Penny cried out, "Ginny, why are you so fat?" Throughout the little frame house, all celebration stopped. On the balcony, Korea's eyes were turned upon Ginny, and you could see what the boy meant. God have mercy on you, Virginia. What the shape of your belly?" cried Mrs. Nairn, exploding with indignation and pulling her daughter indoors, away from the praying neighbors' ears. Her voice was loud and hard, and there was a blackness in her eyes like the blackness of the skies before thunder. How could she have been so blind? She cursed herself for it, and harsh question burst from her lips. "What does you bring such shame upon us, girl? What worthless layabout does you throw yourself upon? What man will have you now?" "No decent man, that does be sure. And why does you blacken your father's name like this at your age? The man as didn't even live to see you born. Thank the gods he didn't have to know about this." "You sure you got some explaining to your precious man of God, child?" At least her words were exhausted, and she sat down heavily, her weak heart pounding dangerously in her chest, having from the exertions of her outburst. Then Ginny told her mother of the afternoon that Rafi Kirjani had raped her. There was a long silence after that, and all you could hear was Mrs. Nairn wheezing. When at least she spoke, her words were heavy and disjointed. "If anybody have to get damnation, that Kirjani boy'll get it," she said. Ginny's sisters were awestruck. "Shall we take her over the health center, Ma?" asked Indra. The midwife comes today." "Is you crazy, girl? You all does know how that woman does run," she mouth like a dog's bottom. "You all leave this to me." That night Mrs. Nairn took her young daughter to see Dr. Khan, an old friend of her husband, whose direction she could count on. There was no doubt about it. The child was pregnant, and what can us do, Dr. Khan? asked Mrs. Nairn. "Marry her off quick as you can," the lean old doctor replied bluntly. Mrs. Nairn scoffed. "Who would take her now, doctor? I just beg you. There's nothing you can do for us." A welcome breeze came through the slats of the surgery windows. Also, you could hear the shrill, persistent sounds of cicadas, while mosquitoes crowded at the screens, attracted by the bare bulb of her simple desk. Dr. Khan sighed and peered over the frames of his glasses. Then he lowered his voice and spoke warily, like a man who has said the same thing many times. "I might arrange something for the baby once it's born, but it must be born, my dear. Your daughter is slimly built. She is young, a child herself. To you she looks barely 3 months pregnant. Don't fool yourself. If the dates she's given us are correct, In 3 months she would be full term. Anything now would be two to Maisie. And if it's born, asked Mr. Nairn falteringly. If it's born, what has happened then? No, Ma, I want it anyway. I want to keep it, said Ginny quietly. Don't be a fool, child. It's my baby, Ma. I want to have it. I want to keep it. And who's to look after you and pay for the baby? Even if that Ginny does agrees to pay, who does you hope to marry? I'll marry, don't worry. You'll marry. You just be a fool. Who will you marry? Kirjani, Ma is going to marry Rafi Kirjani. Dr. Khan gave a chuckle. So your daughter is not such a fool as you think, he said. I told you to marry her off, and the Kirjani's boy's worth a try. What does she have to lose? She's too clever. So Rafi Kirjani was confronted with her pregnant Jenny and reminded of that Sunday afternoon in the dry season when the cans were ready for harvesting. To the surprise of Nerins, he did not argue at all. He offered at once to marry Jenny. It may be that for him it was a welcome opportunity to escape a connubial arrangement for which he had little appetite. Though Sunita Murpalani indisputably had background, nobody ever pretended that she had looks, or possibly he foresaw a awkward police question that might have been difficult to answer once the fruit of his desire saw the light of day. Mrs. Nairn was staggered. Even Ginny was surprised at how little resistance he put up. Perhaps she thought with a wry smile, he's not really so bad. Whatever his reason, you have to admit Rafi acted honorably, and so did the jilted Murpalani family. If privately they felt their humiliation keenly, publicly they bore it with composure, and people were amazed that they remained on speaking terms with a man who had insulted one of their women and broken her heart. Sunida's 5 brothers even invited Rafi to spend a day with them at their seaside villa in Mayaro. And as Rafi had been a friend of the family all his life, he saw no reason to refuse. The Murpalani brothers chose a Tuesday for the outing. There was little point, they said, in going at the weekend when the working people littered the beach. And one of their Land Rovers for the 20-mile drive from Rio Cristalino. They were in high spirits and joked with Rafi while their servants stowed cold chicken and salad beneath the rear bench seats and packed the ice boxes with beer and punch and rum. Then they scanned the sky for clouds and congratulated themselves on choosing such a fine day. Suraj, the eldest brother, looked at his watch and his feet shifted uneasily as he said, "It's time to hit the road." His brothers gave a laugh and clambered on board. It was an odd, sardonic laugh. The hardtop Land Rover cruised through Rio Cristalino to the crossroad at the town center. Already the market traders were pitching their roadside stalls and erecting great canvas umbrellas to shield them for sun or rain. The promise of commerce was in the air, and the traders looked about expectantly that as they loaded their stalls with fresh mangoes or put the finishing touches to this plate of giant melons, whose flashy pink in art glistened succulently under cellophane. The Land Rover turned east toward Mayaro and moments later was passing the cemetery on the edge of town. The road off the coast was busy with traffic in both directions, still carrying produce to market, and the frequent bands and footlights made the journey slow. At last, on an uphill straight about 6 miles from Mayaro, the Land Rover was able to pick up speed. Its ripped tires beat on the reflector stud like a drum roll, and the early morning sun flashed through the coconut palm. Suddenly, a terrible thing happened. The rear door of the Land Rover swung open, and Rafi Kirjani tumbled out, falling helplessly beneath the wheels of a heavily laden truck. At the inquest, the coroner acknowledged that the nature and extent of Rafi's injuries made it impossible to determine whether he was killed instantly by the fall or subsequently by the truck. But it was clear at least. He felt that Rafi had been alive when he fell from the Land Rover. The verdict was death due to misadventure. 3 days later, Rafi's remains were cremated according to Hindu's rites. As usual, a crush of people from all over Trinidad, distant relatives, old classmates, anyone claiming even the most tenuous connection with the dead man, came to mourn and at the riverside pier outside Mayaro. Some of them were convinced that they could see in Rafi's death the hands of the gods, and they pointed for evidence to the gray sky and the unseasonal rain. But the flames defied the rain, and the stench of burning flesh filled the air. A few spoke darkly of murder. Didn't the Murpalanis have a compelling motive, and not by chance did they have the opportunity and the means? But mostly they agreed that it was a tragic accident, It made little difference that it was a Morpalini truck that had finished Raviov. Morpalini trucks were everywhere, and they watched as the ashes were thrown in the muddy Otoyo River, soon to be lost in the warm waters of the Atlantic. Anyway, said one old murderer with a shrug, who are we to ask questions? The police closed their files on the case before the boy was called, and he shook the last of the rain from his umbrella and slapped impatiently at a mosquito. You might have thought that the shock of Rafi's death would have induced a Ginny in premature delivery, but quite the reverse. She attended the inquest and she mourned at the funeral. The expected date came and went. 6 more weeks elapsed before Ginny, by no 13, gave birth to a son at a public maternity hospital in San Fernando. When they saw the baby, the nurses glanced anxiously to each other. Then they took him away without letting Ginny see him. Eventually, they returned with one doctor, a big Creole, who assumed his most unruffled bedside manner to reassure Ginny that the baby was well. "It's through his little pasty, my dear," he said as the nurse placed the baby in Ginny's arm. "But you see, there will be delayed delivery, and don't forget you are very young, and you've both had a rough time with a day, 3 days. His eyes will return. He'll soon have a healthy color." Ginny looked into her son's blue eyes and kissed them, and in doing so, a tremendous feeling of tiredness suddenly came over her. They were so very, very blue, so like Father Olivier's. She sighed at the irony of it all, the wasted of it all. Was the Creole doctor really so stupid? Surely he knew as well as she did that the pallid looks could never go. Okay, so that's it for this for today's project. Thank you for your attention. If I made any mistake, please let me know. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye bye.